everyone. This is a very different version of what we normally do as part of our BCS Animation and Games Specialist Group AGM, when we do a presentation of some sort. And quite often it's a bunch of slides and me talking for a long while. But this time, we've got some very special guests, and one will be joining us very soon. And just before we go any further on that, and before I say anything else, we need to, my guests and I need to hit our, as you said, big blue button to get ready.
Synchronize our watches.
Synchronize.
So just to clarify for folks that may be watching involved in the recording right now or watching later, what we're doing is we're going to be setting ourselves up for our podcast purposes for recording our own audio locally. And the reason we do that is because it means that Michael, who you can see, Michael Rowe, who tends to do most of our editing for us, will be able to then pull together some nice clean audio that's just been recorded locally without going through the interwebs. So that's what the purpose is.
So and I can delete all my mistakes and make you guys just sound normal and I sound perfect. Yes, exactly.
Yes, exactly. So what we're discussing, and so that was going to be free form, wasn't it? Is the Games at Work.biz podcast that that Michael Rowe, Andy Piper, and Michael Martine will be joining us shortly. Have been creating this wonderful podcast that I'm a big fan of. We do, and here he is. Here is him.
So he'll be here when we do our count-in.
Yes, he's connecting to audio, and then he'll have to do his own big red
blue button. Yeah.
Yes.
So hello, Michael Martine. Can you hear us? This is all part of the fun of this. Is normally what I'm doing the podcast.
I was going to say this is like every other episode, right?
So I was just going to say. So just as you know, to let everyone know, Michael and Andy and I have known one another for a very long while, and they have been kind enough to invite me onto the podcast a few times, and I try and contribute some content to it. But I wanted to share something I discovered on being on it, is how interesting it was the way they create the content and how they make this thing happen. So I thought this would be makes a good thing for behind the scenes. But if Michael Martine is operational, are you there, Michael? I may have to make him a co-host. That's what I need.
Maybe that's
make a co-host. There we are. And
I'll
Michael is
him.
now you're admitted. So Michael Martine, are you there when you come off mute? Hello.
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent.
I'm off mute. I'm a co-host. And
that's good.
I'm even on video now. Look at that.
There we go.
Wow.
Even better.
And do you have your audio hijack sitting there, Michael, with Zoom as your application?
That is what I'm doing. So I'm doing my big blue button here momentarily.
Right, so we're ready to do a count-in.
All right. Yeah.
Well, we have gotten ready to. We have not pressed the big blue button.
I'm not from your podcast, so you guys do your counting. Okay, Mike. Or when Michael.
Are you ready, Michael?
Get one more moment. Hang on. Oh my God.
And this is about as chaotic as
every episode's like this.
And my input device is going to be the Scarlett. Yes, so we're good for that. Okay, I'm all set. Let's let it rip.
Okay, and in 3, 2,
you go, guys.
1, go.
Excellent. There we go.
Well done. So you're now recording.
Meters are bouncing and everything else.
Everything's working. So Games at Work.biz. So I'd like to introduce everyone, or get you to introduce yourselves. So we've got Michael Rowe, Michael Martine, and Andy Piper. If you could just tell us quickly who you are, and then we'll get on to where you fit in the podcast. So I'll start with Michael Rowe. Who are you?
Hello, I'm Michael Rowe. I'm one of the founders and co-hosts of a couple of different podcasts that are currently called Games at Work.biz, and we'll get into that later. So that's enough.
Other Michael, if you're operational. So.
Yes, I'm still here and I'm still operational. Hi, it's Michael Martine. Just as a voice print, I'm the other American accent you'll be hearing today. I'm also founder and co-host for this particular podcast, Games at Work.biz, and delighted to be here with you all today.
Excellent. Andy Piper.
Hello. Andy. Yes, I'm Andy Piper, MBCSCITP. And I am a co-host. I wasn't a founder of this particular podcast, but I am now a regular, one of the 3 co-hosts every week for this show.
So there we are. So Games at Work.biz. Now, it's just in case everyone's not listened to it, we should have listened to it, but that's for homework afterwards. But go and subscribe. Games at Work, it's been going for nearly, as gamesatwork.biz, nearly 400 episodes weekly. Now, just let that sink in for everyone. That's quite a lot of content to be producing, and a lot of effort and a lot of time, and equally a lot of experience has been generated for it. But Michael Rowe, what's the, I'll start with you. What's the history of gamesatwork.biz, and what's the point of it? What's the kind of hub of, not the point of it, that's not the right, you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
The hub of why it exists. So what's its raison d'etre?
Yeah. So this all actually started, gosh, I want to say 2005, 2006, with a game called Star Wars Galaxies. And I used to play it in the very first incarnation of that game. You would go out and you would adventure, and when you adventured, you lost stamina. And you could regain stamina by going to the pub, basically, the casino, the whatever, and watch other players dance. And that would give you a buff, and you would go out and adventure some more. And Michael and I were talking one time, and we thought of it as being just really bizarre that you could improve your experience by dancing with Wookiees. Which kind of harkens back to Dancing with Wolves, and the amount of time I was spending on this game, I realized it would just be amazing if you could harness that addictive quality of these MMORPGs in a work environment, and up level your Java skills or improve your architecture skills or whatever. Shortly after that, I was ran into yourself and Andy in the old back in the 2006 days, and there was a lot at the company we were working for at the time, IBM. There were a lot of these internal tools for capturing what people were thinking of, websites they were finding that were interesting, and we had this one called Dog Ear. And Dog Ear was kind of for those who may remember Delicious or Dig, it was a similar idea. You would tag things and it would host a website that would capture all the tags, and you could search for tags, and that would give you different sites that you might want to look at. And so Michael and I were talking again, and we thought we could use Dog Ear, mirror the idea of Dog Ear, Dig Nation, and do a podcast on interesting things people were finding at work, in order to also promote the idea of this upcoming EBO at work on virtual worlds. So we started doing a podcast on that. Dog Ear Nation ran for probably about 5 years, 6 years, and decided in early 2012, I believe it was, that we should really focus back on roots, because we were all over the place, talk about anything. And we decided the whole idea of games at work, the whole concept of, dancing with Wookiees, using games to improve work, improve customer engagement, and improve whatever, would be a great idea for a podcast. And that's how we turned at the beginning of 2012 into playing games at work as a method of finding interesting websites related to gaming technology, virtual worlds, augmented reality, and general tech. And that's kind of the foundation of gamesatwork.biz.
Fantastic. So you very much rely on your content is provided.
User generated. We were lazy is really what it came down. We were lazy. We didn't want to go look for stuff.
I didn't want to say that. I was like,
we wanted everybody else to say
social. We call it social.
Now it's social.
Yeah.
So we got we looked at what other people were saying might be interesting, and then we kind of took our take on it. But we try to keep it within that gaming technology and gaming adjacent technology as our core of our topics.
Excellent. So Andy, you said you're not a co-founder, but you're very close to one, aren't you? So
pretty close.
Yeah.
When did you roll?
I was involved with Dog Ear Nation fairly early on, and we were pretty consistent. I mean, there is a time zone differential, obviously. Here, I'm based here in the UK. I was formerly based down near to one of IBM's labs down near Winchester, and now I'm in West London. Trying to find a time that the three of us could consistently get together was sometimes challenging. So quite often I'd be sitting in the Hursley lab at IBM at the end of my day I think we recorded, we've pretty much always done a Friday, haven't we?
Yeah.
So it's the end of my week on a Friday, and I'd be sitting there and talking to Michael in their lunch hour on a Friday. When we got to episode 200 of Dog Ear Nation, I really needed to not be doing that for at that point. So we kind of rounded the show up, and then I went off and did other things outside of the company, outside of IBM, and changed jobs a couple of times. So I kind of occasionally dropped in as a guest on Games at Work initially, when we could find time, because I was doing a lot more traveling at that point, and it was just very difficult for a period of time to get us all together. And yeah, really the last few years since the pandemic, and where we've mostly more consistently been in one place. I've been more involved, but consistently involved. But yeah, it's been a wonderful thread of both sort of friendship, knowledge sharing, shared history, shared interests. It's been great to have this relationship grow between all of us.
Michael, Martine, I take it you don't disagree with any of that. You're not going to say no, I don't want the continuity Brit or whatever you called yourself the other day, Andy.
Yeah, well, he's been the continuity co-host here too, which is great. You know,
yes.
And any old time when you've got three people, what it does is it helps to make sure that the show does in fact go on.
Yeah.
We strive to do that. We've done a pretty good job over the years here, and it's almost 10 years now running of doing something on a weekly basis, and that requires an awful lot of discipline.
Yeah.
But it's fun. So I'm not going to disagree. It's a yes and. It's fun, and it keeps us all connected with one another, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
That it's more of a tight, loose relationship versus the loose, tight relationship, I'd say. And it also helps us stay in tune with what's going on in industry, because we're just constantly scanning the horizon for what's going on in technology, what's happening in artificial intelligence, how do gaming mechanics really relate to the notion of doing business. And that's been just a hoot to be able to work with all the people that we've had.
So when you on these Friday records, then you've had the kind of like a whole week's worth of people maybe dropping links in various places, and you obviously you're not completely lazy because you do find things yourselves.
Well, not completely.
but when it's, I mean, I've been there a little bit, but how does it work? So Friday, when does it start? What do you have to do? And Michael, Martine particularly, I noticed you tend to be the chief, whenever I've been on, be the chief wrangler of those links to kind of create some sort of production order, so a story to flow. Everyone contributes, but just talk us through the flow of that.
Absolutely. So it's not actually all that special, although there are times when we do annoy one another in how do we get this all orchestrated and organized, as you said. And we've tried different tools and techniques. Where we've evolved to most recently is we've got a group chat running throughout the week. And in that group chat, we will drop in things that are interesting, some things that we would feel like, hey, this is great to talk about. Others are like, yeah, this is interesting, but we're not going to talk about this on air. And we share those. As we get to showtime or close to showtime, we go through those links, open them all up, take a look at them, and then say, well, which ones make sense? And then we dynamically create a show order, if you will, that says, hey, here's a bunch of things like what Andy and I did just a couple of days ago. Wow, there's an awful lot of discussion on artificial intelligence and what's going on in the chat space and so on and so forth. So that's a logical grouping there. And we try to create a storyline, if you will, that goes through it. So that storyline will usually start with a theme, such as the metaverse or AI or what have you. And then it will usually devolve into, oh, we've got a couple of things that we do want to get in because they're really pretty cool and they're worth mentioning, and you might not have seen them otherwise. So we do that in a shared document. so that the running order is there. We get all the links orchestrated that we're going to run through as best as we can. Sometimes we get real excited about a topic and we run longer than we thought. Oftentimes we think of something else that we saw that wasn't in the running order, but because we're flexible and that's the way we are, we're like, yeah, okay, let's throw that in. Maybe we didn't get a chance to read that ahead of time, but boy, isn't that an interesting notion? So the spontaneity for me of the natural reactions is really quite cool. We're not rehearsed. We haven't made up the jokes that happen before the show occurs. You're usually getting the real live stuff, but Michael, you've got a point on this. I think too.
I've got a story. So years and years ago, for people who follow the social media space, you may know the name Veronica Belmont, who used to be the head host of a podcast called Mahalo Daily. She does a science fiction fantasy book reading podcast now. She used to be a product manager at Adobe. Really, really interesting. And early on in our career of the show, we actually got her to be a guest on the show. And not to say we weren't excited. We weren't excited, right? We were really excited to have her on the show, and we did our. This was, I think, was this still Dog Ear Nation or was it Games at Work?
It was Dog Ear Nation. Yeah,
it was Dog. Okay, and so pretty much the same thing. We got our all links together. We shared them together as part of the discussion. We kick off the show. We're going through the whole show, and we're just about to wrap. And I look down and go, "Oh crap! I didn't hit record," which is why we do the count in, right?
Yes.
Well, this is before we had the current setup as well. So
yeah, this is even before the separate recordings of everybody, right? So we've got multiple backups the way we do it now. Anyway, so we get to the end and it's like, oh crap, we didn't hit the record. We looked at everybody looked at their watch like, well, we could try again and just do a little abbreviated show. She was very gracious. She said yes. We do hit record, and she is spot on the same jokes at the same time. It's like, that's a pro. That is a pro. Anyway, sorry, Michael, go ahead. You were continuing.
Well, so that gives you a feel of what the show looks like and how the big importance of pressing the record button.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on the technical side of things, then, Michael Rowe, you are the audio engineer and wrangler of all things in that space. And what do you end up doing?
Well, it's actually interesting because my undergrad degree was in television production, and I actually learned how to edit for radio too, using tape and a razor blade and literally splicing things together. So I do have a little bit of background in the old school technology. But no, it's actually pretty well organized now. So we do what's called a double ender. So everybody records, we record 3 sound files. One is a combined file of everything. One is my local sound in one channel and everybody else in another channel, right? That way you can line things up and make sure everything's clean. And then one is strictly your own local audio.
Right.
So at the end of the show, we make sure that everybody takes that local only audio and they upload it to a folder that I have a script that then runs. And as soon as it sees the files in there, it picks it up, moves it somewhere else onto my local network. It disappears, so you know it was uploaded successfully. I am now, about 2 years ago, I started using actually an iPad app to edit the podcast called Ferrite, which is phenomenal. I used to use Logic, right? You know, the big production Logic studio stuff, and you can, drops all kind of sound effects in, you can edit, everybody has their own tracks. I try to level everybody out. I do the same in Ferrite now. I try to clean up the background noise. I'm not going to be overly aggressive on that. Right? Because some natural sound is okay. I do get rid of some overtalk, right? Some of it I leave because it's natural and it's conversational. We have a intro sound and outro sound that was recorded by a local band, and it's actually the music from a video game called Big Blue. So that's the intro and outro. We have a standard intro. We also, one of the things we do, and we did not do this episode yet, but you're going to do it for us, you just don't know it yet, is we do a separate little recording saying, this is episode blah, 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 and we give it a title. So we cut that out, splice it, put it at the beginning. Basically, it's all about, cleaning up the audio, making sure the background noises are cut down, and that it sounds conversational yet clean. At the end, every track is mono. We put out a mono file. We played with stereo for a while where we put each of us slightly in a different location. So I actually did that for a while. I thought it was annoying to listen to. And when we stopped doing it, I had forgotten. And so I was like, God, why is Michael so quiet? Right. So a little bit of spatial audio, we stopped that. It's all mono. We flatten it down, and then we upload it to our website, where I hand it back off to Michael to do the show notes, or Andy does them sometimes. I've done them sometimes, but pretty much.
I was going to say, so Andy, your social media is very, or has been very much your thing over much of your career. What do you do to let people know about podcast, or is there something? Well, I know the answer to this, but what goes with the podcast?
What special skills do I bring to this other than being British and grumpy?
And really good at Google search.
Yeah, you're good at Google search and probably now at doing chat GPT queries.
So I have helped a lot, especially in the last couple of years with the website, and we do a lot of. We're pretty basic in terms of modern podcasts, I think. So a lot of podcasts now go to one of the big hosting platforms and do everything through that platform. And there are platforms that literally let you record directly into them and do everything there. So we are old school in the sense at the moment that the entire history of both podcasts, we've used WordPress as our CMS. Right. And we've used a plugin called, in the past, we've used a plugin from a service called Blueberry, called PowerPress, which lets you host the audio files, and then it spits out an appropriate RSS feed in podcast format. One of the cool things, and I've seen this being mentioned a lot at the moment, is how RSS has kind of quietly survived all of the upheavals across the technology industry in the last 20 years, and is still driving blogs and feeds and podcasts fundamentally, even as different big tech companies want to sort of position themselves as owning podcasts or having podcasts on their platform. So you can quite easily still set up a blog with an RSS feed and have your own podcast without having to be on any of those big sort of vendor-driven sites. You can choose to go to one of those, and you may get some reward for it or not. But that's been quite interesting. So I've helped a lot with that, trying to do a bit more around the hosting. In terms of the promotional stuff, again, helping to find channels to promote it. I think that is sometimes challenging. And on the other hand, it's our podcast. We do it as much for us and for our friends to some extent as we do for a massive audience. We'd love to have loads and loads and loads of people listen to us every week, but we don't need to, and we've carried on for 15 years without necessarily having hundreds and millions and thousands or whatever of users. Michael, go ahead.
However, if you, our dear listener, would like to tell your friends to,
Definitely.
Like and subscribe, go to our website at gamesatwork.biz, find us on your favorite podcatcher. We're on every one of them that we can find, uprank us, star us, rate us, anything to help promote us. We wouldn't complain.
For sure, definitely. We definitely appreciate the support from folks and people sharing and people letting us know what they think, because that is really valuable and important to us as well, that people let us know what particular things and what angles that we may have come across or not come across are interesting. We've come quite a long way as well from the beginning. So we talked about Dog Ear Nation and that being very much driven around people digitally bookmarking things, tagging things, and then getting them into our radar that way. And then over time, we've gone through this phase of having a Slack server between the three of us, which has really sort of taken the RSS feeds from some of our favorite tech blogs, as well as tweets from people who are tagging us and bringing it all together for us. And that was really just massive every week, just so much content to sift through from, all of the big tech news sites, and then trying to bring it down into something interesting. And I think at the moment, really in the last, I would say 18 months, we've come to more of a shared group chat between the three of us, because we kind of know the sort of topic areas we want to cover and the things we are looking at every week, but also making sure that things we might see on Twitter or Mastodon or somewhere else come in as well and get included. But that seems to have helped to refine that process at the that beginning that Michael, or all of us, but Michael particularly, is good at and has helped with putting together that run of show and that storyline.
Yeah.
And I think beyond that, and if I'm going to talk a little bit about my role some more as well, is I've spent a lot of the last 10 years in particular doing public speaking, storytelling, developer advocacy, which has been my day job. And I do tend to get us to stop and describe what we're talking about a bit more, because it's an audio podcast. And quite often the three of us have seen the story or the video and the funny thing that we were talking about, and then we'll just start talking about it. And then I'll kind of say, okay, everybody, let's just kind of describe to the person listening with their ears, very much like how I'm now trying much harder myself to add visual descriptions to pictures when I upload them, so that people can get a better sense of what's being shared online. It does help a lot to really sort of stop and describe the context of what we're talking about.
Excellent. Well, certainly I've certainly heard more than once, and also occasionally when I've been on, it's like, look at this, and you point at something in the office, I mean, that you've got, and then you suddenly realize you're on an audio podcast again and say, I'm on an audio podcast, and I now need to describe that. But that's
it is a running joke though for us.
Yes.
I mean, we do realize we're not on video, and there's reasons for that.
Yes, we absolutely, at least I know personally, I have a face for radio, but
well, we're doing this one on video now, aren't we? So
gosh darn
it. sorry to break that bubble. So I mean, so we're kind of starting to talk about some of the things you talk about, including things that you have to talk about because you can't see them. So there's some, but within that, there's some broad themes that come across a lot, aren't there? So you definitely, obviously, we'll talk a bit more about Metaverse in a minute, I think. But Lego and Apple. Who wants to go on?
I used to have
Lego.
Oh right, okay. Well,
why
I used
Apple?
to have when we had a Slack channel. I made Slackbot start being rude to us when we mentioned something too often. So like if we kept posting things about Apple or iOS or something, it would say, this isn't just an Apple show, remember, and things like that. The Lego thing, I think. I mean, I'm a huge Lego fan. And if I tilt my camera, there's a load of Lego up on the shelf here. There's Boba Fett just there, and everyone is awesome and other things. So, there's some stuff there. So that's certainly been one of my personal interests for a long time.
Shuttle. Yeah.
You see, I can't, and space is also a thing. So Michael's got two things in there at once. So look, I'm certainly not going to say that I'm the only person that's interested in that. It's a group thing, but I think also just it's always been one of those things that fits really well into the creativity, collaborative space. I mean, there's a reason why Lego themselves have a program around, creative meetings and play at work and things like that. So I think that's been really fun to bring in. Apple, I think, was also kind of a joint thing. We've all been big long-term Apple fans, but I mean, back in the day, I think when we did the original show, there was certainly I was going out to stand in line for either Mac OS boxes updates or the iPhone or whatever. So
we actually have an early episode of the two different ones. One, Michael, you did a thing, and then I did an interview thing too, and we did interview shows of people getting their first iPhones.
Wow.
at the
while
Apple
in
Store.
line, we recorded
While in-
them,
yeah.
interviewed them in line, waiting for their first Apple product, which was
Yes.
that was a lot of fun too.
But I think I think also it's a good reminder for me as well that to pay more attention across the industry. I mean,
Right.
Apple have certainly been a massive factor in what's been going on in consumer technology for the last 15 years, but they haven't historically had it, as we know, a great footprint or great presence or as visible a presence in the enterprise space. So, and that's certainly not to say they don't, because I've been using a Mac for the last 10 years in an enterprise space, but it's a good reminder to sort of look around and be aware of all of the different platforms and things that affect what we do day to day, both work and play.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly not an Apple only podcast. I don't want everyone to think that, because there'll be some people that absolutely detest Apple in everything it does. But the being able to describe it through having used it, and even the tools using to create podcasts and things, it's and I know Michael Rowe, you shifting to try and see if you could use an iPad, just not a laptop, was kind of and building your applications and stuff. How much work can you actually do on some of these things? So that's a natural thing to be able to talk about, isn't it? And also on the Lego thing, what I particularly like is that Andy's there to make sure you don't put the S on the end of Lego. And I know you know that shouldn't be there, but it's a very US centric thing that I get pitched things all the time that have the word Legos in my day job, and it absolutely drives me bonkers.
As long as there's an apostrophe, I guess we're okay, right?
If it's a possessive.
That's right.
Or an Oxford comma somewhere in a sentence.
I love the Oxford comma. So I'm
so Martine, what's your pet, aside from robots taking over your eyes or whatever? What's your
Yeah, we're not going to talk about spiders and eyeballs here on this particular recording.
Avoid that one. No.
Yeah, thank you.
But what would be your favorite kind of subject in that kind of Lego Apple space? Obviously Apple, but aside from that,
the things that I've been most intrigued by are things around quantum computing, around artificial intelligence, and the confluence of all of these kinds of elements. I mean, the idea with Lego that's so attractive is just the building block notion, and whether we're talking about prims. And again, for those of you who are not part of the long-term Second Life and other
we
environments,
will get to that.
I'm sure we will. But the ability to build things together and to construct them and to leverage them and use them and see the game mechanics and the physics, which goes back to quantum kinds of notions as well. Those are all really just fascinating to me. And the confluence of these technologies that are coming to bear, it always feels like right now, right? These are the good old days. Right now are the good old days. And if we're able to take them into account and imagine what the future might hold, this is just super fun to do. And I love doing that with Michael and Andy. And we are able to use the range of topics that we touch on to have those kind of discussions every day, which is just delightful. So those are the sort of things that get me excited too.
Well, certainly as a fan, I'm clearly a fan. The chemistry between you guys when you do that, and the love of the tech, and not just tech for the tech's sake, but the change it's going to make and the impact it has. I mean, I've often shared this with you, but during lockdown, I would be doing laps of my garden to avoid going out anywhere, listening to Games at Work.biz and having your three dulcet tones in, and that kind of friendship at any point in the day, however low it felt or wherever it was going, and it being obviously something I'm quite a techie, so it's really nice to kind of hear that and feel that passion for it. And as you said earlier on, you're doing it because it is entertaining to do for you as well, and that obviously comes across.
And we were trying to do it in a way too, not just for you, but we were aiming for kind of commute distance, right?
Yes.
So there's some podcasts out there that
that's
go
why we keep it like 30 minutes.
on and on.
That's it. I was going to say it's short. It's sometimes for me it was always too short. It was like keep going. Or
well, it's a hard balance to make, right? Because I mean, as Michael calls out, I mean, I listen to a couple of podcasts that I have to put on 2x or faster just because they're 3 hours long, and you know, I do have a job, and you know,
and a life,
family, and a life, and everything else. So while they're interesting, it's like get to the point, or you know, put that in an article. I'll go read it later. But I do think it is key that this is, we do it because we love it. We love technology. We love the area. And as Andy kind of pointed out, it gives us almost an excuse to delve deeper on topics. And I find the shows that I like doing more are the ones where we go off the rails and we go deep on a topic, right? You know, it's only a 30-minute podcast. And if we spend 15 minutes on one topic, that's a long time. And we've had a couple recently that I thought were just fantastic, where we spent 15-20 minutes of the podcast on one thing to kind of go deep and understand something. And and I use it as a technique for myself to understand something better, right? Yeah. Because, you know, I've got smart friends, right? Some of them we get on every once in a while. They come on every once in a while more. That's fine too. And others I get to talk to almost weekly. So it's a great way to just keep the finger on the pulse, so to speak, but also to learn. Right? It's as much for learning for myself than for the listeners.
I think as you. And I kind of find this too, as you look at something, there's that surface thing of, oh, that was interesting. And then when you start talking, you hear a slightly different point of view from the people you know really well. You think, oh, I hadn't really thought of it like that. And where's that going? And it zooms you off somewhere, which is really fascinating stuff. And I'm often talking to myself when I'm listening to you still, not just around my garden, but round in the park now.
You're participating.
Yes,
I was about to say, and probably a good conversationalist with yourself.
Oh, it's fantastic, and you know, it's more acceptable to talk to yourself than walking around the park. But
yeah,
it's often when you're coming to a realization about something, and you go, "Oh, what was the name of such and such, or what was that game called?" And I'm shouting, "It's a space area," or something like that. And just the odd person walking a dog looking at me, going, "What are you doing?" It's like, well, but But on a particular subject that we definitely need to have a little fiddle around with now, is Metaverse. Given the word is back, and given back in 2006 we were all kind of part of our 8-bar movement, and we were doing things in places like Second Life, and there was kind of corporate stuff going on and all those things. It coming back has been. Have you found that annoying that it's come back? I mean, it's good that it's going to happen, but have you found it annoying to go, no, we've done this, we've talked about this, why are people not looking at the history of some of the stuff, do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's annoying, but the history aspect is the part that really gets me. It's like everything old is new, right? It's like, oh, we're going to have a concert. It's like, yeah, done that. And I don't mean that as a negative. I think it's great. It's people experiencing it for the first time. It's just like, you know, riding a bike, right? Millions of people have ridden a bike before you. And when you finally get to learn how to ride a bike, it's the most incredible thing. It's fantastic. So we're having another bike riding moment right now. And hopefully what that means is bikes will become more acceptable. Right. Yeah. And that's it. It's like running and banging your head against the wall. You can keep banging your head against the wall, and eventually the wall might fall or you fall. And I think the metaverse concept, right? The whole concept of extended reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, whatever reality you want to talk about, is trying to bang the head against the wall of becoming an acceptable norm.
Yeah.
How it becomes an acceptable norm, and an acceptable norm for what is the interesting part. Yeah. Is it just entertainment? Is it just education and training? Is it just marketing and sales? These are all really interesting questions, and that's what's exciting, again, because they're the same questions, but the answers may be different.
Yes. and obviously it sits in. I mean, games. Given that a lot of it is powered by game technology,
Exactly.
But people have the misnomer that maybe it's all playing when it's game technology enabling it. That fits bang in the title of Games at Work.biz, doesn't it? It's sort of,
yeah.
I mean, that's kind of useful. Yes, go on. Sorry, Andy.
So for me, it's all really interesting because I think really the IBM's adventures and experiences and experiments in Second Life and related technologies is what brought the four of us together as people that know one another and have become good friends. And when I think of my interest and experiences with Second Life back in 2006, 7, 8, 9, they were around both collaborating at work, bringing in external social content onto spaces, surfaces inside a 3D-ish world, but also then socially, I got to meet, I got very immersed in the space and got to meet people who were doing, as Michael just referenced, concerts, right? Doing concerts as indie singer-songwriters and were independently successful and in a very small way, but who I'm now friends with on Facebook and I've known for, I think about and think, well, hold on a minute, I've known that person for 15 years. This is weird. And I know them because she used to play music in Second Life and none of that stuff is relevant anymore to what I do day to day. And seeing it all come forward, and as Michael just said, sort of, everything is old is new again in the context of Metaverse as we think about it today. I think there's still a ton of applicability of those experiences and what we're talking about every week, and how those things connect up. But clearly the technology has moved on, the bandwidth has moved on, the graphics cards and capabilities have moved on. The ability to immerse yourself more as a consumer has moved on. So yeah, I find it really exciting and interesting to be able to bring that historic. I mean, my degree's in history, right? So I'm in tech by going sideways at a certain point or whatever, or actually I've always been in tech, but I'm really fascinated by the way that society, culture, work, technology, all of these things have overlapped. And that's another reason why I'm excited to be a member of the BCS as well, and have the ability to have this kind of group meeting and conversation and figure out how something that a fellow BCS member might know about that isn't in my immediate sphere of experience, but because we're all in computing, maps together. And I'm just wandering off in different directions, right, as we go here, just as a good episode of our show would do.
That's all good.
Could I touch on that
so,
too?
Michael, yes.
The thing I was going to talk also about was the culture and adoption aspects of this. If you think about Lego, if you think about Apple, if you think about all these related elements that have been around for a while, you got to reach that tipping point. What's the killer app? What's the use case? What are the things that are going to drive large quantities of people to go do something different than what they had done before? And the pandemic has gifted us, among other things, a newfound notion of having technology shrink distances between people. We're on other sides of the planet here, for Pete's sake, and we're able to converse and engage with one another as if we were just down the aisle, down the hall from one another. And I love that. And that's part of that loose, tight relationship that a number of social networks have facilitated over time. I'm not so much annoyed, I guess, by what's the ground that we've plowed over. I think there's a notion of a reinvention of, I can do a presentation in a virtual world. Isn't that super deluxe cool? Yes, it is. But there's more to it than that. What are those tipping points? And as we start to see some of those examples, that's another thing that just draws us forward, and that we thought we were reaching a tipping point back in 2006, 8, 10. 12 didn't quite happen. Do we think it's going to happen now? That's another area for just rich, enjoyable conversation, isn't it?
I was going to say, if only I was an industry analyst looking at that sort of stuff. Oh, I am.
Oh, yeah, well.
No, I think that the bit that intrigues me is that social side. I don't just mean social media, but that societal change and shift. Like we've had that societal change and shift for, do we work in an office or not? It's all been kind of driven by, I mean, the technology was here to help us, wasn't it? But we could have been doing this ages ago. But the pandemic kind of forced us down that route. And when I talk in business circles about it, they want to talk about industrial use and they want to talk about enterprise use, and then they start talking
Industry
B2C.
4.0.
Yeah, well, they start talking about consumers, and I said, well, yes, but there's also the social side of things. There's art. It doesn't have to be commercial. There's helping people. There's charitable institutions. There's just hanging out with your mates without actually paying somebody loads of money to do it. If you go and, I mean, I walk around the park listening to you guys. It's a social thing. I mean, it's not about, it might be on the expensive.
It's a temporarily displaced social thing.
It is a
isn't
temporarily
it?
displaced, yes. And there's lots of ways of us working at how we can communicate with one another, and it doesn't all
virtual fire pit.
Yeah, money. But that's I just finished listening to the audiobook when I wasn't listening to Games at Work.biz, but the audiobook of Matthew Ball's Metaverse tome. And I thought I was going to be annoyed at it, but I wasn't, because I thought it was going to be, some dudes turned up and told us all the things we need. But he does actually make a lot of good points and understands where it all fits. And I can't remember if we mentioned it when I was on the show last time, but the book was around then, and it sort of triggered. There is a lot of things worth you guys looking at about Apple, and particularly the impact their payment system has, and not just Apple, Google, but the 30% off the top of everything, how that's potentially going to not make this happen this time, because it's a sort of downward spiral of just sucking all the money in. But that's just corporate affairs, isn't it? I don't necessarily agree or disagree with them on that, because that would be inappropriate and not necessarily the view of my employers or anyone else. So anyway, but let's just shift a little bit to games, given this is Games at Work.biz. Even though we're talking about this intersection here, and we're almost talking about not playing games just then, I would say we're all gamers in various shapes and forms. What's your poison when it comes to gaming? So who wants to go first?
I'll jump in, because partly because Michael kind of gave us a preview of his right at the very beginning of this whole story, but I'm a very bad first-person shooter / action game player. One of my earliest sort of semi-professional roles was helping with the Linux port of Unreal Tournament back in the late 90s. That was kind of my first open source kind of involvement. And so I've always been really into those kind of games, and Halo and all of those. But I'm generally pretty poor at them. So you will destroy me on Battlefield multiplayer easily. But I love
getting on a bit, Andy, aren't we? So.
Well, yeah, everything's slowing down.
But you've got a Steam Deck, haven't you?
I've got pretty much all the I don't have the PlayStation. I've got the Steam Deck, and I've got an Xbox, and I've got other things. Yeah.
So
you have the little one with the crank on the side?
No, but it's but mine's in the play date. Mine's coming next month, I think. Fingers crossed.
Never managed to get through the ordering process on that. It kept falling over on me. I'm jealous. So that's why Michael said that, wasn't it? You knew that, didn't you? You knew take the house down. So Michael Martine, then I'm going to come to you.
Yeah,
Michael Rowe just slighted.
So my game diet spans a whole bunch. I'm famously enamored with 8-bit style games, and have been playing things like that. I prefer the more casual ones than the ones that you have to really dive in and deal with for a long time. Probably comes as no surprise that I'm a big fan of the Lego Star Wars games on the Wii. That was my go-to when I was recovering from COVID, earlier this year, and I crushed it and did a whole bunch on it. But I also love the old time, and many of them are German, and I guess that's because just I've got German family. Games like Fangdenhut, if any of you guys know that, it's a little cones you got to go around, and you can like grab onto somebody else, and if you bring them back to your base, they now become like your players. So that's a cool game. And Mühle, which is I think it's called Millstones or something like that, is another favorite of mine. So it spans, but I love playing also the board games and those kind of tactical things.
Fantastic. Michael,
how about you?
So mine, I actually like 3 types of games equally well. obviously I like MMORPGs. I'm a sucker for WoW, especially now that you can fly dragons.
That's World of Warcraft, in case anybody's not.
I'm glad you did that. Yeah.
Yep. Of course, if you have to ask, you don't know the game. I love real-time strategy games, like Age of Empires, StarCraft, SimCity, those types of games where you're dealing with a technology tree. Imagine that, and trying to deal with simulations, and then finally, and this one I know you enjoy too, flight sims. The 40th anniversary edition of Microsoft Flight Simulator. It was one of the main reasons I upgraded my Windows PC a while back, and I really do enjoy just and it's not the realism, as in I really want to learn how to fly the plane exactly like that. It's the, oh man, I used to live there. I want to see what the neighborhood looks like now, sort of, right? And as these flight sims have improved with better GPS data, better satellite imagery, better 3D models, etc., it's just really cool to fly over areas that I have been at or that I want to go to. And they just introduced helicopters, and yes. I sounds a lot like maybe not as good as Andy, but I'm horrible at flying a helicopter. So if we compare helicopters to first-person shooters, I am much worse than Andy.
This is sorry, Ian, but this is things like flight simulators, and we did an episode on this earlier in the year. I remember having a deep conversation about it. But things like flight simulators are really where all of the stuff going on really comes together. In the UK at the moment, just a quick shout out, there's a really good BBC show which has got Professor Hannah Fry talking about the wonder of modern life, and she like pulls apart any sort of modern technology, literally takes it apart, and then like talks about the concepts that have, you know, and historically what's gone into them. And if you think about flight simulators, it's another amazing example, because you've got GPS, you've got the actual physics of putting a thing into the air, a big heavy object, and then the modeling of that, and then you take GPS and mapping and go all the way through
weather, the weather data that's piped in real time, digital twin concepts, all of that stuff, and really this is why gaming is such an animation of such amazing parts of the technology and the computing industry, because they're really bringing all of these different threads together. It's fantastic.
As a history buff, Andy, you might like to know that I've got a copy of Flight Simulator that I bought soon after the World Trade Towers went down, because I wanted to preserve a digital representation of what existed at the time on those CD-ROMs, and it's up there on my shelf. For that reason,
certainly a fascinating. I mean, the history of flight sim has been really interesting to follow as well, but where it is now, and as Andy says, that actual digital twin, if you want it to be, of the world as it is at the moment, with the weather as it is at the moment, you can do, but it can also be as you don't want it to. You can change it. So, well, make it rain, make it snow, make it whatever, change the whole thing. So you end up with digital twins and the full kind of what if
Godzilla.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of things can be stuck in. I mean, I in that space, I mean, one of the things that I often harp on about is No Man's Sky, because it's an amazing space exploration game that is kind of the opposite of flight sim, because it's genetically creating the universe of quintillions of planets and all the flora and fauna on them, and it's all done with maths. So it turns up and it goes, this is what this place looks like, and then that place then exists, whereas it didn't exist and nobody else may ever see it, but it's preserved somewhere, and that there's just the computing required in that is immense and quirky, and places that aren't real but are real. We're kind of back in the meta space there, but you also get to fly around and kind of zoom things, and particularly flight sim and No Man's Sky with a VR headset on is a completely different ball game.
I bet. Yes,
you haven't got there yet, have you, Michael?
You must. It keeps getting closer.
That's
as soon as I can
fantastic.
spend $1 bazillion for the Apple branded one.
Well, yes, it'll turn up eventually, won't it? I'm sure.
Eventually.
It's been pushed again, hasn't it? I've just.
Or so
How
the
many-
rumors say.
How many times are we going to hear Robert Scoble say when it's going to be, and then it isn't? I think our original nemesis when we did 8-bar, I think, it's fair to say, I mean, in a nice way, Andy. One of the reasons we set up the blog called 8bar.com, which we're trying to resurrect at the moment, or resurrect the history of it, so it's preserved in a suitable way. But we were working in a stately home in Winchester, or near Winchester, and we were doing all this high-end tech, emerging tech stuff and interesting stuff. But then it was all the US West Coast Silicon Valley crew were busy blogging, and particularly, Robert Scoble was blogging about all these cool things they were doing. We think, we're doing them, and we've got a stately home. We must be cooler. So we just kind of directed it all. That was the vibe we were trying to go there. And we're kind of back to that social interaction and that these things feeling like something, aren't we? Well, I mean, time's flown by there, hasn't it? We're almost at the top of the hour there, as we say often. I'd just like to, thank you all for chatting to us and explaining what was going on. And I hope the record button got pressed properly. And just I'd like to, if there's anyone in the audience who's got a particular question they'd like to throw at you, then please raise your hand and I'll try and do whatever hosts have to do to get you in. But if not, I'm sure how can you be reached? The promo advert again.
Well, they can always go to our website at gamesatwork.biz, where we have a post for every show, every episode, and comment. But if they really want to help, go to their favorite podcatcher, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Amazon Podcasts or Spotify or Stitcher or the Blueberry Network. And first, give us a 5-star right? Or rating, because that means a lot.
Helps, yeah.
And then put a review. Ask a question in a review. We read all the reviews that we get, and we can react on the show there. Or they can reach us on our Mastodon instance, which is at Bots in Space.
Games at Work _biz at botsin.space, which is where we currently exist in the Fediverse. If you're interested in Mastodon and the Fediverse, I can talk all about that another time. But no, we also have a Twitter account, which is Games at Work _biz, because you can't have a dot in a Twitter handle. Games at Work _biz on Twitter. We also exist there. And I think we have a Facebook page as well. So yeah, we're in different places. Do check us out. If you go to our gamesatwork.biz domain website, WordPress site that I occasionally tinker with, you should find relevant links in the header there.
Fantastic.
And tons of show notes for every show too. We try to do a good description of what the show is, so you don't have to listen if you don't want to, but say, oh, that's a great one. And then all the things that we refer to, so that when Andy says something and Ian goes, wait a minute, it's that. Chances are it's in the show notes and you can find the link to the thing that we're talking about.
That's excellent. Well, thank you very much.